time, so there will be 2 talks related to this research efforts. It will be on stationary measure on homogeneous spaces. So Jean-François Kahn got his PhD, I don't know how it's called in France, from Yves Benoit at École Normale.
At École Normale in Paris 7.
École Normale in Paris 7, and so now he works at CNRS and associated with University of Paris Nord. And so there's there will be 2 talks, so it's with the same title. One, so Jean-François Kahn at stationary measures on homogeneous space, 1, and next talk will be Yves Benoit. So
thank you very much. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving us this occasion of explaining our results. And I say our because all the results I will mention to you, the original ones, are come from a joint work with Yves Benoit. I have a problem with choke. Okay. So the problem I will be concerned with in this talk is the following. I will have a group, say gamma, and gamma will be acting on some space, say X. So for me, group means locally compact topological group, and X space means locally compact topological space, and the action is continuous. And I will focus on the questions, the question which is rather natural from the point of view of dynamical systems. That is, given some point X on X, can you describe the orbit closure of gamma of X under gamma? So this is a priori a dynamical question, but it turns out to be closely related to problems in number theory, and in particular in Diophantine approximation. So let me give you an example. So first, let me tell you that this is related to number theory because the kind of spaces X I will be looking at is the following kind. This is X will be a quotient, G mod lambda, where G is a Lie group, and lambda is a lattice in G, that is, lambda is a discrete subgroup which has the property that the quotient carries a finite G invariant measure. And of course, a basic example, but which is also somehow the most important one with respect to applications in number theory, is the case where G is SLDR and lambda is SLDZ. So for example, if D equals 2, this is the quotient is a unit fiber bundle of the modular surface. And also there is another one which is maybe more familiar for people coming from dynamical systems. One has to use this. Wow. Sorry. I'll play a little. Okay. So one which is more familiar for people from dynamical system is the case where G is a semi-direct product of SLDZ with the torus TD. TD is RD mod ZD. And lambda is SLDZ. So this is really a non-standard way of saying that in this case, when I look at the G action, and in particular the lambda action on the quotient G mod lambda, this quotient is just the torus, TD, and looking at the lambda action on this quotient is just looking at the standard action by automorphisms of SLDZ on the torus TD. And now, gamma will be some subgroup of G, which will act on the quotient by left translation. So again, let me precise that this standard presentation both contain this very important case, that is the case of the action on SLDR mod SLDZ by translations of G, or the case of the action by automorphism of subgroup of SLDZ on TD. And so let me say a few words about the relation with number theory. And it was remarked by Raghunathan, I think in the 70s, that a famous Hall conjecture from number theory could be interpreted in these languages. That is the Oppenheim conjecture. Conjecture can be translated in a problem of this form. That is, Oppenheim conjecture is the following. Given Q, a non-degenerate quadratic form on R3 with signature 2, 1, and then you want to describe the set of values of Q at Z3, and the conjecture was saying that this was dense in R3 when Q is not a multiple of a rational form. Of course, if Q is a multiple of a rational form, this set is not dense in R3, but the conjecture was saying that the converse was true. And Raghunathan noticed that this statement about quadratic forms in R3 could be translated on a statement about SO21 orbits and SL3R mod SL3Z. And I think that most of you know that this is a very famous theorem by, so I will be careful with my hands. This is a very famous theorem by Margulis. I think this is in 1986. So Margulis proved the statement. I will write statement. On the SO21 orbit on this quotient, SL3R mod SL3Z. And so in particular, this gives a proof of Oppenheim's conjecture. Which dated back, I think, to the 30s. So maybe not, maybe Oppenheim, I think, originally didn't conjecture this statement in 3-dimensional space, but in 5-dimensional space. This is detail. Okay, so let me go back to this framework of dynamical systems, and let me explain why this problem cannot be solved in a general way. That is, it is hopeless to have a classification of orbit closures for any point in X when gamma is a general subgroup. It's not possible. So, of course, you have a classification for almost every point. That is, under very weak assumptions on gamma, the action on G mod lambda is ergodic with respect to the Haar measure, so that you know that for almost every point with respect to the Haar measure, the orbit is dense. But what you are concerned with is a situation of exceptional points. That is, you have a set of full Haar measure where the orbit is dense in general, so you can assume that the action is ergodic, it's very general, but you want to know what happens at singular points, at points which do not belong to this set of full measure. You really have to know something about what happens at every point. This is important. And now there is a very general phenomenon in dynamical systems. So if you have, let's say, a diffeomorphism on a space, and if it admits a hyperbolic fixed point, so I make the picture in dimension 2, so I assume that I have a hyperbolic fixed point. So this means that, in particular, there is a stable leaf for the point, and also a non-stable leaf. And now, if you have two closed hyperbolic fixed points, if they are close enough, you can make a picture of this form. So you have two fixed points. Here is the stable leaf of 1, and the unstable leaf of this wedge point. And then when this picture arises, you know that there is no simple classification of orbit closures. Because what happens is that when you have this picture, so you have a dynamics T on some space X, and you suppose that this picture arises. So X is a differentiable manifold, and these are hyperbolic fixed points which are regular enough. And then what happens is that there is an embedding of the full shift on two symbols in X as a closed subspace, which is invariant by the dynamics. And on this set, the dynamic is conjugated to the shift map. Now, so you have a piece of the space which is just the full shift on two letters. And in the full shift with respect to two letters, there are uncountably many invariant ergodic measures, uncountably many closed invariant subsets which are not conjugated to each other. So it is not possible to have a classification. It is a much too complicated object. For example, if you want, you can build a minimal subset which is not periodic. This is a very classical example. You take this sequence, and then there is a substitution. So let me give an example of a very singular set. You can build a substitution. That is, you start with sequences, and when you see 0, you replace it with 0, 1. And when there is 1, you replace it with 1, 0. So this is Morse substitution. And now, if you iterate this construction, you start with 0, then you get 0, 1, then 0, 1, 1, 0, then 0, 1, 1, 0. It's very difficult to compute. Okay. 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. And you iterate this construction, you get a sequence. You take the dynamical system, it generates in the full shift. And this dynamical system is minimal and not periodic. And then, of course, you can produce a lot of such examples that you embed in any dynamics with such nice hyperbolic properties. So if you want to have such a classification, you need to put some assumptions on the group gamma. And the first general theorem in this setting is the following one. It's better in this sense. So this is a theorem which is due to Ratner, 91. 91. So you assume, in this situation, general situation, so you assume that gamma is spanned by one parameter add unipotent subgroups, and then for any x, and not only for almost any x, for any x in Gmon lambda, when you look at the gamma orbit closure of x, it is an orbit under a new group, and you say a little more, that is, so it is closed, in particular, it is a closed orbit. Of course, it is closed because orbit closure is closed. So we have to know that there is a group which has the property that the orbit closure of x is closed and equals the orbit closure of gamma. And you even know in Newton-Morse that is, if x is d lambda, then the stabilizer of x, of course, is d lambda d minus 1. This is the stabilizer of x in d. And its intersection with H is a lattice in H. That is, in other terms, the orbit Hx carries a finite Thank you. A finite H invariant measure. That is, the orbit is almost compact in some sense. So, of course, so this explains somehow why Oppenheim's conjecture is not true in dimension 2, because if you were working with the group SO11, this is a subgroup of SL2R, and this group is not spanned by ad-unipotent one-parameter subgroup. So I forgot to say what I meant by ad-unipotent one-parameter subgroup. This is a one-parameter subgroup GT included in G, such that for any T, if you look at the adjoint action of GT, this is an automorphism of the Lie algebra. So this is a linear map, and you ask this linear map to be unipotent. That is, you ask all of its eigenvalues to be equal to 1. So this is a one-parameter ad-unipotent subgroup, and this is just, so you assume that gamma is a group that is spanned by such one-parameter subgroups. And if you look closely at what SO11 is, this is up to a finite index subgroup. This is just a one-parameter subgroup, SO11, and this one-parameter subgroup is hyperbolic. So in particular, when you look at the action of SO11 on SL2R mod SL2Z up to a finite index subgroup, what you are looking at is a hyperbolic flow. So it has a lot of hyperbolic fixed points. So here I made the picture for a diffeomorphism, but this works the same for flows. And now you know that this flows has a lot of hyperbolic fixed points. So you know that there will be a lot of, not of subsheets, but of suspensions of subsheets, which are embedded in the space, and you cannot have a classification of orbit closure. And this explains one. But now, if you look at SO21, then you know that the connected component of this group is just PSL2R. So in particular, this group is spanned by ad-unipotent one-parameter flows. And in the proof by Margulis of Oppenheim's conjecture, there is a very precise study of the action of one-parameter ad-unipotent flows spanning this group on SL3R mod SL3Z. So this is why this theorem works in dimension 3. This is because the group is spanned by ad-unipotent one-parameter flows. And you see, a unipotent matrix is really the contrary to a hyperbolic matrix. There are no eigenvalues, so there is no stable leaf, there is no expansion. It's really different. This is somehow the general philosophy of this theorem. Okay, so in our work with Eve, we are concerned with somehow extending Ratner's theorem, that is giving orbit closures for groups which do not fit in the assumptions of Ratner. And there is a general philosophy. So somehow the very general philosophy is that as soon as your group is not acting through a hyperbolic diffeomorphism or through a hyperbolic flow, such a classification should hold. And in particular, there was a conjecture due to Shah. So I don't know exactly the date, so I won't write it, it's more careful. Okay? And that if you assume, say, that G is an algebraic group, and that the Zariski closure of gamma is spanned by unipotent flows, then such a conclusion should hold. And so one can ask, what is it? What is such a group? So what is an algebraic group which satisfies this assumption, that is spanned by unipotent flows? And from the general theory of algebraic group, it's rather easy to describe what such a group is. if H is a subgroup of some GLV, which is spanned as an algebraic group, algebraically, by unipotent flows, then you can write H as a product, which is almost a semi-direct product, which is a semi-direct product in this case, where U is really a unipotent group. That is a group where all the matrices may be put in some bases. All the matrices are triangular with eigenvalues all equal to 1, and S is a semi-simple group. So, of course, now, if you are interested in understanding this conjecture, there are two extremal cases. The first one is when the group is unipotent, is the group there is no S, and the second one is where there is no U, where the group is semi-simple. And in the unipotent case, Zariski-Dense subgroup is just a co-compact subgroup. So when you have an orbit closure classification for a group, it's more or less easy to deduce an orbit closure for its co-compact subgroups. So the first difficult case is a case where H equals S. That is when you take a group whose Zariski closure is semi-simple. And in semi-simple groups, it is very easy to have very small Zariski-Dense subgroups. There are Zariski-Dense subgroups which are not co-compact, which are not lattices. As soon there is in fact, if you take a semi-simple group, if S is semi-simple, then if S is semi-simple, there is an open, U is not the good letter, there is, when you look at the product of S by itself, there is a Zariski open subset of S times S, which has the following property, that if you take any pair GH in O, if you look at the subgroup of S that is spanned by G and H, it is Zariski dense. So that, in other terms, as soon as you take two elements in a semi-simple group, if you did not do it on purpose, they span a Zariski dense subgroup. So every subgroup of a semi-simple group, more or less, the generic subgroup of a semi-simple group is Zariski dense. So in this setting, I can give the theorem we obtained with Yves Benoit. That is, we assume that gamma, so this is a subgroup of G, and assume that when I look at the adjoints, the image of gamma by the adjoint map, so this is a subgroup of the linear group of the Lie algebra, and I assume that this subgroup, that Zariski closure, so let's say H is Zariski closure of this group, and I assume that this is semi-simple with no compact factor. So this is the technical assumption. But this assumption just means that the semi-simple group is actually spanned by unipotent subgroups, by unipotent one-parameter subgroup. So assume you make this assumption, and then for any x in G mod lambda, the orbit closure of X is homogeneous that is precisely exactly the same conclusion. That is, it is an orbit of some subgroup. I shouldn't have denoted by H. And this orbit carries the finite invariant measure. The same conclusion holds, except that you have to be a little careful because in the setting, so this is not the same group H. I have been a little wrong with notations. In this setting, the acting group gamma is connected because it is spanned by one parameter subgroup. So that this orbit in particular is an orbit of a connected group. Whereas in this setting, the orbit might be non-connected. Let me give some examples. Let me focus on example. So assume gamma is a subgroup of SL2Z, and I will assume that gamma is Zariski dense in SL2R, and in this setting it is just what is called in hyperbolic geometry non-elementary. Non-elementary, that is when you look at the action of gamma on the compactification, the natural compactification of hyperbolic space, it does not preserve a finite family of points. And assume so you have such a non-elementary subgroup, and again, this is a generic assumption, that is, as soon as you take two matrices, if you did not do it on purpose, they span a non-elementary subgroup. Then, for any x in the torus T2, which is not a rational point, then gamma x is dense in T2. Of course, so there are two possibilities. If you take x with rational entries, then the orbit is finite. But if the orbit is infinite, that is precisely if x does not have rational entries, then the orbit is dense. And in this setting, this is due independently to Mushnik and Givart and Starkov. But this is somehow the abelian case, and the non-abelian one is the case where gamma is a subgroup of SL2R, which is non-elementary. And you take x belonging to SL2R mod SL2Z, and the same conclusion holds. That is, if gamma x is infinite, then it is dense. Okay. So now we can ask for the strategy for proving such a theorem. And let me go back to Ratner's theorem. Here the strategy is a strategy coming from ergodic theory. And because in fact, in Ratner's theorem, as I said, H, this group gamma, through the adjoint representation, may be more or less seen as a semi-direct product of a semi-simple group with respect to the unipotent one. But the really important case is the case of unipotent groups. That is not only spanned by unipotence, but really groups which are subgroups of the group of triangular matrices. And in this case, the group gamma is an amenable group. It is, in fact, even a nilpotent group. So when you look, in this case, when you look at the orbit closure of X under gamma, this is the space which comes with an action of gamma. Of course, it is an invariant subspace. And say, if you assume that your lattice is co-compact, this is a compact space. And if your group is amenable, it will preserve a probability measure on this space. So in particular, in Ratner's theorem, the key, the first key step is the proof of the classification not of orbit closures, but of invariant probability measures. But in our situation, the acting group is not amenable. That is here, what you take is a Zariski dense subgroup of a semi-simple group. And a Zariski dense subgroup of a semi-simple group always contains a free subgroup. So it's a free subgroup with two generators. So it is not an amenable group. So if you cannot hope to have an orbit closure classification from a classification of probability, of invariant probability measure, because when you look at the orbit closure, and you look at the action of gamma on it, there is no reason for this action to preserve a probability measure. The group, you can think to gamma as being a free group, as an abstract group. So in this case, our strategy is nevertheless to have a classification of a measure theoretic object. So what we do is to apply a strategy that can be thought as being due to originally to Givart. I erase the name of Givart, and but this is a strategy that comes from ideas that are already present in the paper by Givart and Starkov. Not explicitly stated in this way, but the strategy is to look at random walks. And what do you do? That is, so what is? Let me go back to the general framework. That is, you have a group, and your group is a priori not amenable group, not amenable, and it acts on some space. And now what you can do is to fix mu, which will be a probability measure on gamma. So when you are working in group theory, you can think as a probability measure on a group, to a probability measure on a group as being a law for making random walks. That is, when you have a probability measure, you can pick a first random element in gamma, which is distributed with respect to the law mu, and then you can take independently a second one, a third one, etc. You can take sequences of random elements and just make the product. Okay, so this is a random product, and if your group is just Rn, what you are looking at is just a classical random walk. But here I want to look at non-commutative random walks, so I take a measure on an abstract group, and I have this random product. And now I can look at the structure this random walk on the group gives on X. And what is this structure? It defines a Markov chain. That is, if I pick a point X in X, now I pick a random gamma, and I will jump randomly to gamma X, where, again, gamma is an element of the group, which is random, but which has low mu. Okay? And now I can iterate this process, and this is precisely what probabilists call a Markov chain. So I'm not in a, let's say in a heuristic way, I'm not looking at a deterministic dynamical system. That is, I'm not looking at one map, but I'm looking at a random map. And for a non-deterministic dynamical system, there is a very weak notion of invariance of measure, which is the following one. So if I look at one map, I just ask if gamma is deterministic here, an invariant measure is just a measure which has a property that its push forward by the map gamma is equal to the original measure. But now, if I have a random dynamical system, I can look at a weaker notion, which is the following one. So I take mu to be a probability measure on X. Now I push it by some element of the group, and I take the average under my probability measure on the group. So this gives me a new measure, and I call it the convolution product of nu by mu. And I say that nu is mu stationary if this average push forward measure is equal to the original one. In other terms, what I'm saying is that if X here is random with distribution nu, then this gamma X is random with distribution, the convolution product of nu by mu. And so I want the measure, when I ask this equality to hold, I'm just asking the measure to be invariant under the random dynamical system. And now the interest is the following. That is, if I take my space X to be compact, and if I start with any probability measure on my group gamma, just by the standard argument which creates invariant measures for continuous endomorphisms of compact space, I know that stationary measures exist. Stationary measures, probability measures, exist as soon as X is compact. Okay. So this is, of course, much better in some sense than invariant measures, because I don't know in general if invariant measures exist, but I know that stationary ones exist. And in this situation, what we can do is giving a classification of stationary measures. So I will, yes, I will erase everything. So I will forget the group gamma, and morally the group gamma. So I will take mu, which to be a probability measure on my group G, okay, on the acting group, and somehow the group gamma will be the subgroup spanned by the support of the measure. But now I forget about gamma, and I have to make an assumption of semi-simplicity of mu. So I will assume that the subgroup spanned by the image, by the adjoint map of the support of mu. So let me say it again carefully. This is a measure on the group. I take the support of the measure. This is a closed subset of the group. I take its image by the adjoint map. So this is a group now. This is a subset of a linear group. So I take the subgroup, which is spanned by this subset, and now I take the Zariski closure. So this is a subgroup of the linear group of the G algebra, of the Lie algebra of G. And this subgroup, of course, is Zariski closed. And I assume that it is semi-simple with no compact factors. Yeah, so this is the analog assumption to the one I was making in the topological classification. So I take this group, I assume that it is semi-simple, and I also ask mu to have compact support. Okay, and now the theorem is as follows. That is any mu stationary ergodic probability measure on G mod lambda is homogeneous so let me give you a name. So I take mu to be a stationary ergodic probability measure. Then it is homogeneous. That is, there exists H in G, which is a closed subgroup with the property that nu there exists some point x in G mod lambda such that nu is carried by the H orbit of x, and nu is H invariant. So when I go back to Ratner's theorem and to our topological theorem, which I erased, I'm sorry, what I was saying is that every orbit closure is an orbit of some group. So it is a set of the form Hx. And what's more, I knew that this set was carrying an H invariant measure. So the topological theorem gave me a particular set of measures. That is a measure which are invariant by the support of mu and which are homogeneous measures. And the conclusion of the ergodic theoretic theorem is that these are all the mu stationary measures. And in particular, this tells me that all the mu stationary measures are invariant. But this is totally not evident a priori in the general setting that if gamma has, in some sense, Zariski dense, semi-simple Zariski closure, then the mu stationary measures on G mod lambda are invariant. So, and I don't know any other way of proving this result than the way of which consists into giving a classification. That is, would I want just to prove that stationary measures are invariant? I wouldn't know how to do it more simply. I really have to make a full study of stationary measures, then give a classification, and it will just follow from the classification that stationary measures are in fact invariant. but this is not really, so maybe there is a very simple way of doing it, but I don't know it. Okay, so I just have to explain one word in this statement. I'm very not good in combinatorics. Okay. So the word I have to explain is just ergodic, and this just means that when you so this is related to the fact that when you have just one transformation, of course, you never make a classification of invariant measures because any barycenter of invariant measures is an invariant one. So in fact, what I'm saying is that the invariant measures form a convex subset, and what you classify is the extremal points. And the extremal points are what is called ergodic measures. And for stationary measures, this is exactly the same phenomenon. As soon as you take any convex combinations of stationary measures, it is stationary. So what is important is the classification of ergodic ones, that is extremal points among stationary measures. So if you take convex combinations of two measures of this form, it has no reason to be a measure of this form. So you have to put a restriction somehow. Okay. So let me give examples of this setting. Again, in the two cases I looked at in the topological case, and these are the following example. So assume that mu is finitely supported on SL2Z, and the subgroup spanned by the support of mu is non-elementary. So this is really analogous to the topological setting. Then, if you take mu to be a probability measure on the torus, which is stationary, and if you assume that mu is non-atomic, then mu is Lebesgue. And in this setting, this is due to Bourgain, Fuhrmann, Lindenstrauss, and Moses. Let me just say a few words about this work. In this case, you are looking at a measure on the torus. So what you can do is taking Fourier transform, and you look at this convolution equation here. You take the Fourier transform, you get a new equation, and there is using additive combinatorics. There is a wonderful study in this paper of the convolution of the Fourier image of this convolution equation, using very smart additive combinatorics. You deduce that if you start with a nu which has somewhere a non-zero Fourier coefficient, then in fact a lot of Fourier coefficients are non-zero. And at the end, using the fact that you are looking at a function on ZD, which is the Fourier transform of some measure on the torus, you finish by deducing that you are looking at a finitely supported measure. This is a very large paper. And so what we did with Yves is to adopt a different strategy for this problem. And the point is that our strategy does not use Fourier transform. It is the geometric strategy, just on the space, not on the dual space somehow. And as this strategy does not use Fourier transform, it can be applied to the general framework. Because locally, things look a little like the way they look in a torus. And so let me give a statement that is not contained in the work by these authors. And this is again a non-commutative statement. That is, I take mu to be a compactly supported probability measure on SL2R. So let me give an example. For example, mu is 1/2 of a Dirac mass at some g plus 1/2 of a Dirac mass at some h, where G and H, the pair GH belongs to the Zariski open subset EO in SL2R mod SL2R, which is a subspace, an open subset where all pairs span Zariski del subgroup. So I assume that the subgroup spanned by the support of mu is non-elementary. Then, if I take a stationary measure on SL2R mod SL2Z, and if nu is non-atomic, then nu is a SL2R invariant probability measure. Okay. So as I told you, if you start with this ergodic theoretic classification, you hope, as in general, mu stationary measures exist, you hope that this ergodic theoretic classification will give you a topological one. But it is not that evident because even, for example, if your space is not compact, you have to use some recurrence somehow. Because, of course, if your space is compact, you start with an orbit closure. This will be a compact subset, and you know that it carries a stationary measure. But in the main case, which is this case, the case of SLDR mod SLDZ, the space is not compact. That is, you still have a difficulty. It is almost a compact set, but it has a cusp. So if you take a closed invariant set, you don't know that it carries an invariant measure. You have to use some recurrence to build the invariant measure. So in the case of unipotent flows, there is a general theorem by Dany and Margulis, which is the following. You take G mod lambda, you assume that GT is an ad-unipotent flow, an ad-unipotent one-parameter subgroup. Then you know that for any x in G mod lambda, for any positive epsilon, there exists a compact subset in G mod lambda with the property that for any positive t, when you look at your flow on the space, and you look at the time the flow starting from x spends in the compact, so I have been a little too short, sorry. You look at the time your flow spends in your compact subset. It has Lebesgue measure larger than 1 minus epsilon. Normalized Lebesgue measure. That is, if you start with a point here, you've got a space that is not compact. You start at a point, you flow. So, of course, your measure, for a generic point, the orbit will be dense. So, you start with the point and you will spend some time in the cusp. But when you make an excursion in the cusp, then you spend a lot of time in compact set. Okay? And when you know this property, this directly gives you that if you start with any point x, its orbit, even if G mod lambda is not compact, then the orbit closure of x carries an invariant probability measure. Because most of the time is spent in compact subset. So in our setting, we need something analogous, allowing us, starting from an orbit closure, to build a stationary measure on this orbit closure. And this is, so you mean a recurrence property, but, and this is somehow a property of recurrence for a Markov chain. So here, here is the property, and this is the theorem, which has been proved under additional assumptions by Eskin and Margulis, and that we extended with Eve to our purpose, to the general framework. That is, again, you start with probability mu as above, and you look at the induced Markov chain on G mod lambda, then it is recurrent, and let me quantify, it is in fact recurrent in a very strong sense, that is, if you start with any x in G mod lambda, with any epsilon, positive epsilon, there exists a compact subset in G mod lambda, such that for any integer n, if you look at the following probability measure, so this is a probability measure that after n step of your random walk, when you start from x, the random element you obtain belongs to k. So you walk randomly on your space, and you just look, you stop your random walk at time n, and you look at the probability measure of belonging to k. And this probability is larger than epsilon. So this tells you precisely that if you start with an orbit, you look at its orbit closure, then it will carry a stationary measure. So the corollary of this is an equidistribution property. Which is analogous to what happens in the proof of Ratner's theorem. The following equidistribution property, that is, have no choke more. I will have to stop. Okay. You start with some x under the analog, still under the same assumptions. For any x in G mod lambda, I look at the following probability measure. I look at the Birkhoff average of these quantities. So I look at these quantities, and I know that the limit points of these quantities as n goes to infinity are probability measure, because they tend to remain in compact subset. But what I don't know is that if I take limit points of this probability measure, they are stationary. There is a priori no reason. But if I take Birkhoff averages of this quantity, they tend to become stationary. So precisely, this goes to some ergodic mu stationary measure, probability measure. Okay, so this, when you know this theorem, you know how to find the topological classification from the ergodic theoretic one. And let me finish this talk by a question that is, which was the original question on this topic by Givart. That is, this problem was solved on Torai by Bourgain, Frohman, Innenstrauss, Moses, answering a question of Givart. And the question was precisely this question: what are the limit points of this family of probability measures? And in our statement, we know that if we take Birkhoff averages, the limit points are a very small, belong to a very small set of measures, but we are able to prove that these limit points, for example here, are probability measure, but we do not know whether the limit point of these sequences are precisely the same as this one. This seems to be true. This is actually true under the assumptions that were made by Bourgain, Furman, Innenstrauss, and Moses. They do not need in their setting to make Birkhoff averages. In our setting, we don't know. So this is an open question. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments? So your question, the question of Givart is that for any measure,
Semi-simple probability whose image under the adjoint map span a semi-simple group.
That it's
Yes. What is?
that at,
Yeah,
the, at
yes.
the end you get ergodic measure.
Yes. And if, for example, there is a counterexample by Breuillard, if you take mu to be concentrated on some unipotent flows, then there is a counterexample in his PhD where you know that this measure will in fact go to infinity. So it does not seem to be true when you do not assume the group really to be semi-simple.
Okay. Any more questions?
In the Bougainville mechanism, they get a rate.
Yes.
You don't get a rate. Right?
No. This is another open question.
What?
This is another open question.
And probably it's not clear how to approach.
For us, it is not.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.